Good evening. You're very welcome to this week's episode of Centre Ground. Before we begin, I would just like to pay tribute to Stephen Kerr from the Irish Inquiry, who makes this live stream possible every week. It takes a huge amount of time, huge amount of effort, and in the coming weeks he hopes to bring on other presenters. So he's actually asking you if you have any videography skills, editing skills, that you would go to the Irish Inquiry website and click on the tab Help Us, and there you can fill in details of how you think you can volunteer your help. Also, Stephen is putting out a call for anybody who would like to present their own programme on the Irish Inquiry platform. We don't receive any sponsorship or there's no advertising, so all the work is done in a voluntary capacity. As I've said, tonight the spotlight is on the judges and our court system, and I have three guests lined up. First of all, Colm Granahan, founder member of ACT, which is Anti-Corruption Taskforce, and we have Enda from Buncrana together, and we met Enda on our very first live stream. And Stephen Manning is a founder member of Integrity Ireland. And tonight, sadly, Marion McGowan is not available to be with us to anchor our panel discussion. But in her place, we have Margaret Fox Lennon. And Margaret is from DCA Warriors, and she was our guest on our very first live stream. So my first guest tonight is Colm Granahan, and I first got to know Colm during the in the aftermath of that terrible, brutal eviction over in Strokestown, the eviction of the McGann family. And in the last 2 years, I've come to know Colm. He's a man of outstanding integrity who has volunteered all of his time to assist people who are being evicted or who have been evicted. So, Colm, you're very welcome to Centre Ground, and thank you so much for agreeing to take part tonight.
Thanks, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here to do anything I can to I suppose expose and get out there what is actually going on.
I suppose, as I said, I first got to know you in the aftermath of that terrible, brutal eviction over in Strokestown. And I think maybe we need to be reminded of just how brutal it was. Mercenaries from Northern Ireland came down acting on behalf of KBC Bank and removed the McGann family from their home in December 2018. And David, the eldest member of the family, was and still is in very poor health. So we have a short video clip to show our viewers just how brutal that eviction was. So Stephen, you can show us that video now, please.
Hey, are you going to stand there and watch this happen? Private property! You're on private property! I'm not on any private property. Hold. Hold. Do your job. He will be responsible. He will be responsible. Give me a hand. That's one of your own.
That's one of your fucking own. That's a disgrace. You should be fucking ashamed of yourselves.
No, you take it easy. Get off the property.
Next one, yeah. Ring letter, Kenny.
How can you arrest me?
Ring letter,
How
Kenny.
can you arrest me? How can you arrest me? There's not a court order. There's not a court order.
Hold.
Why did you with you?
Hold.
Don't fight them, Paul. They're in the wrong. They know they're in the wrong. They're all on Facebook at the moment.
Take that away. I won't take it away.
Take it away.
I won't take it away.
Take that away.
I won't take it away. Don't lay your hand on me.
I'm not touching you.
Don't lay your fucking hand on me.
I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you.
Yeah.
or something else.
You should be fucking ashamed of yourself.
I'm not ashamed.
Fellow Irishman, yeah, should be. You're a fucking disgrace. You're English?
British.
British, oh yeah, British bastard.
You ran once before, you
Yes, bastard, you'll be run again.
Colm, a sad reminder of what happened there on the 11th of December 2018. Now, fortunately, the McGann family had a lot of support, but the experience of most people is that this is something that happens quietly and silently without anybody knowing. Can you tell us a little bit about what happens to people in the run-in to an eviction?
Well, I suppose in the run-up to the eviction, they're bombarded with paperwork and threats of what's going to happen and everything from the banks. And of course, the first thing that they do is go and get a solicitor and a barrister, if they can afford them. If they cannot, they're on their own. And, you know, personally, from my experience, is that a solicitor or a barrister will only bring you to the same end eviction. I haven't seen any of them that has stopped any evictions yet. And, you know, I've seen firsthand in courts when litigants, I wouldn't be paying much heed to what will be going on in the legal circles, because I'm long enough around courts to know that the end result is going to be for the companies, let it be bank, vulture funds, whoever, they'll win. There is no way out of it. What the judge usually says is, you got the money, you must pay it back. Now, I have seen legitimate questions asked, you know, in the courts, and they just completely ignore you. They move on and take no notice of what you're saying. You're only there as a number, just someone that stands up. They'll say, well, the defendant, please rise. Once you rise, that's it. They make the order. You have been there and it's granted, and you have no rights whatsoever in the court, especially the lower courts. The circuit court is fierce bad, but the high courts can be just as serious. Like the situation that you have there in them courts is that you have a barrister representing a bank or a vulture fund, and he's higher in the pecking order than the judges that's sitting on the bench. So, you know, the benchers and what Richard Boy Barrett was on about, you know, the orders that have their, I suppose, the pecking order. And you have a barrister down on the floor that's higher in the pecking order than the judge that's above on the bench. For his own sake, he's not going to go against the barrister. So it's just a game to them. It's just all acts, and believe me, they are all acting there. That's what they are, actors.
Well, now you are, you know, supported in what you have just said there by Dr. Edmund Honohan, who is the Master of the High Court. And last November, he actually made that exact point that you have just made. He said that judges are making wrong decisions in the court because they are relying on the barristers, and the barristers are not providing them with the necessary information for them to make proper decisions. They're withholding information from the judges, so that people are unlawfully getting evicted. But if I could just take you back to the human story, you know, we read in the papers about people getting evicted and about what's happening in the courts, but you have first-hand experience of reaching out to poor, unfortunate people that are facing eviction and people who have been evicted. Can you just tell our viewers a little bit of what those people are going through, kind of on a human level?
Well, there's a few cases that's very dear to me, and there's one in particular where, at the time, going back probably 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't have the knowledge or the experience that I've gained since. At that time, I was helping someone, and that person ended up taking their own life. They were in bits for months, and I tried all I knew how at the time. And it was a statement that was made in the court. He was given an adjournment. He wasn't in good health. He had a letter before the court and everything. There was other stuff going on in his life. And what the register says to him is that I'm giving you the adjournment for 2 months, but the next time you're back here in front of me, your property is gone. So he says, I'm giving you 2 months. And that fella committed suicide. Now that's the hardest end of it. Now, in the second answer to your question, there was a particular couple in Galway with a house full of children. He lost his job when the recession came in 2009. I think into 2009 he lost his job, and his wife's hours was cut. And in that house, I know now, but I didn't know at the time, but my wife got me phone number and she contacted me. They had all the money that they could borrow and get spent on barristers and solicitors, and they were at the end of the line and they were heading for repossession. She rang and she said about the state the husband was in. They'll know who I'm talking about, but I hope they're the only ones that do. But I went to that house and it was around 6:30 in the evening. They were having the dinner and the children was in it, and we were having casual conversation in front of the children, and the next thing they went into a room watching television. And that man, when the children left the room, had a sigh that he nearly felt like that he had escaped something. Maybe he was afraid that I'd have brought up anything in the conversation about what they were going through. But when the conversation started, and the wife had told me beforehand that she was very fearful that he was going to commit suicide. He was shamed for the children going to school, how they couldn't manage to provide this, that and the other for the children, and now their home was gone. And I stayed probably until 11 or 11:30 that night, and I told him what we were doing with banks, and I gave him a bit of hope and gave him the option to either come and do what we were doing, or, that there was nothing else I knew. So at that stage, he said he'd go, that was the only chance he had, he'd go with us. Now, that a few years back, that couple are still in their house, their children are still at the same school, they haven't paid a penny to the bank since we told them to stop paying. They haven't paid a penny to the bank since, and the bank has come near them and won't be coming near them.
Now, Colm, people that are watching this tonight will say that couple have stopped paying the bank, and if everybody did that, then the banks would collapse and that system won't work. What would you say to that?
Well, just for where I am, and I hope I'm not defaming anyone, but I'm just saying that the banks and the court service, that they're all supposed to be experts. Like I see the central bank now, where it's the regulator for insurance companies, for credit unions, you name it, they're regulating it. After the complete balls up that they made of the economy back in 2006, 7 and 8, and where they didn't keep an eye on the ball. Anything that you see going out of control price-wise, let it be insurance, mortgages, banks charging for the use of your own money, everything is about commercial progress for them, and it's about profits at the end of the year. Now, these people that has their salaries increased, let it be the TDs, the Taoiseach, the bank managers, everyone was bailed out by the man and woman in the street, every one of us. And where they expect, with this lockdown, with everything, where they expect people to be able to pay what they were paying back in the 2000s, it's not possible. So if it's not possible, it's not possible. They can.
Well, as the man said down the country, you can't beat blood out of a stone. So if a couple just don't have the money to pay, there has been actually very significant write-downs for people on their homes, and I won't name any names, but people, you know, that would be very much in the eye of the media have had write-downs of a couple of million on their homes. Colm, if anybody wants to get in contact with you, how can they do so?
Well, you can send a message to the ACT page, Anti-Corruption Task Force. You can send a message there with a phone number. I'll contact you. You can see us on Facebook, on Twitter, any of them things. I'm not too well up on the computer and the things, but if you send a message to the page, I'll get it, or one of the other people dealing with the banks will get it, and we'll make contact with you, anyone that's in trouble. And just to say that there's the boys down in the south, anti-eviction task force, they're available to help as well, and the Common Law Society in Letterkenny. We're all basically on the same thing, and the amount of people that we have kept in their homes because of the criminality that's in the paperwork, and we can identify it and put a stop to it, send them a letter off, ask them to reply, and they're not able to reply because it's boxed in, they're boxed into a corner. It's the old saying, you're either right or you're not. You're not half right or half wrong. You're either right or wrong. That's what it's about.
Okay, Colm, and I want to thank you for the support that you are giving to people, because it's not until somebody is actually facing eviction and has actually not a penny to their name that they will turn to people that will give them help. So, Colm, I just want to thank you for that, and you've given us a great insight into what is happening. And as I've said, Edmund Honohan, the Master of the High Court, has actually come out and stated that that people are being illegally evicted. And I suppose we'll put the link to that that report from the newspapers. I think it's from the Irish Independent. It's up on screen now. We'll actually put a link to that report underneath so that people can actually follow it up. So we'll be coming back to you again later on this evening, Colm. Thank you so much for that.
No, thanks a million. God bless.
Now, Enda Craig is from Buncrana together, and Enda was part of our very first live stream on the HSE. But tonight he's here to chat to me about how he actually took a case against Donegal County Council. It went through the Irish court system, ended up in Europe, and it resulted in the Irish government having to amend legislation. And you're very welcome back to Centre Ground.
Thank you, Anna. Very delighted to be here again.
And Enda, just give us a very brief background to the case, please.
Okay, 1990, Donegal County Council proposed a wastewater treatment plant for Moville and Greencastle to be discharged into a very beautiful place where I live along the shores of Lough Foyle up here in the Inishowen Peninsula. So we were very lucky. We had access to a very highly qualified civil engineer, and we looked at the plans and we identified massive mistakes in the plans. So we made a case submission to Buncrana, thinking that you know, there's absolutely no way they can go ahead. And lo and behold, Buncrana gave the go-ahead, give them the green light. So we had to consider the possibility of going to the High Court, and of course, as you know, that costs a lot of money. But fair play to the community, they think so much of the area they live in. They all gathered money together, which was a substantial sum of money, put their trust in the people that were in charge of the campaign, and off we went to the High Court. We had put a huge amount of work in it, but you know, I have to tell you, Anna, we were innocents abroad. We were traveling a road that we knew nothing about. None of us had ever been on it before. and boy, did we get some education.
Okay, so I
yeah.
just hold you there for a moment because we have a video that actually gives a brief outline of this proposal to build the sewage treatment plant. So you can roll it there, Stephen.
The communities of Moville and Greencastle have been tirelessly campaigning for a wastewater treatment plant for over 30 years. Currently, domestic and commercial wastewater is flowing directly into Lough Foyle from multiple outfall points in Moville and Greencastle. Irish Water have put forward a proposal to build a wastewater treatment plant in Kavanagh, in between the two towns. The proposal would see wastewater pumped from Moville to the plant, treated and discharged into Lough Foyle. However, their proposal is flawed for many reasons. Firstly, the proposal excludes Greencastle completely, along with up to 15 housing estates in Moville, with no indication of if or when they will ever be included. Secondly, the outfall from the plant will still flow directly into Lough Foyle, along the scenic shore walk and the bathing beaches. In the event of a plant breakdown, which is a common occurrence as seen at Ringsend earlier this year, raw, untreated sewage would be pumped into this area and wash up along the shoreline between Redcastle and Kinnigo Bay. The solution, which was unanimously agreed to by 12 county councillors back in 1990, is to build the plant north of Greencastle and pump into the open sea. In 2013, the High Court granted permission for the plant to proceed. However, in 2016, the European Commission made a formal complaint against the Irish government for the improper application of environmental legislation. This would see the Irish government being taken to the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg. In fact, they admitted their guilt and rectified the defective legislation in the Dáil.
So, Enda, can you just tell me a little bit about what happened when you got your case to the High Court?
Yeah, unbelievable. We had a really good legal team. They were tremendous, did a huge amount of work. But, you know, we went up specially to Dublin in the morning when it was to be decided which judge would actually run our case. We went there and the Buncrana had a team there, Donegal County Council had a team there, and we had our team. They all went into the President of the High Court's office, and in about a half an hour's time when they came out, our team came out crestfallen. We knew to look at them. They weren't happy about the whatever happened. And the other guys came out smiling from ear to ear. So my senior counsel called me over. I was the litigant at the time. My name was on the thing. And he called us over and he said, "Gentlemen, I have really bad news for you." He said, "Your case is lost." I really couldn't understand what he meant because our case was not to be heard for the further 10 weeks. But this man was telling us our case was lost. And I said, "Why would you say that?" He said, "Based on the judge that has been appointed here this morning, I can tell you your case is gone." And he said, "There's only one thing wrong with your case. It's too good. You're a threat to the state. You're a threat to Buncrana, and this is what happens." He says, "I am so embarrassed to have to tell you, but he says, I will not have you in there for 4 or 5 days wondering how you're getting on." He says, "I'm sorry to have to tell you." And that was the straightest guy I ever met along the way with anything to do with the law. And I thought it was tremendous of him to come up front and tell me straight. And he said afterwards, this is what happens. They are never sure what's going to happen until they find out which particular judge is going to hear your case. And he said, we're long enough here to know the score. So evidently, we went along the way and doing everything we needed to do, not knowing that this was waiting for us. We used to wonder why the engineers were never put out when we would find massive mistakes. We could never understand. They seemed not to care less. They knew that down at the end of the road, this is what was waiting for us. Really didn't care what we had or what we didn't have. This was going to be taken care of for them. And I must tell you, the senior counsel was absolutely right, because in 10 weeks' time, when we went in, we had our 4-day judicial review. He withheld his judgment, and later on, 10 weeks after that again, we went up specially to hear the judgment. And boy, did we get a judgment. We were buried in style. We were buried without mercy, and told, and they wished the council and Irish Water Godspeed, and that to get their plant built, it was held up for too long. And as far as he was concerned, this now to me is absolutely unbelievable what he did. He called the legal team from Buncrana, and I called them to the bench, and he said, based on what you've heard me say here this morning, you might want to make an application. I said to my solicitor who was sitting beside me, what exactly does that mean? And he wasn't able to answer me. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. What it actually meant was that he had told the team that if I dared to go to the Supreme Court to appeal this decision to the Supreme Court, that he would put the total fees of the whole case against me. Both sides, everything, the three sides were going to be on me specifically. And I was told that would have run into the region of 300,000 euro. So needless to say, that was something else. But what I didn't know, Anna, there was a white knight that had come to the court every day, and I didn't know who he was at the time.
Okay, can I just hold you there? Sorry.
Yeah.
So what you're telling me is that you were given a choice. You could either agree not to appeal to the Supreme Court and the costs wouldn't be awarded, all the costs wouldn't be awarded against you, or to say that you were going to appeal it to the Supreme Court and you were going to carry all of the costs of the case. Is that what you're saying to me?
Absolutely. Blackmail of the highest order, pure and simple. You can call it nothing else. Pure blackmail. I'm just an ordinary person from the hills of Donegal. He would have cleaned anything and everything that I had gathered up during my whole lifetime. And this came out of the blue, and I could not believe it. Anyway, we went outside, and I noticed the gentleman that had been typing in the court for the 4 days, and I got talking to him. Turned out to be Peter Sweetman, an unbelievable gentleman who I cannot praise highly enough. And I went over and I got speaking to him, and he said, listen, he said, Mr. Craig, sit down and write that letter and tell this judge you're not appealing to the Supreme Court, and that gets rid of the threat of the 300,000. And he said, better than that, he says, I will make you a promise now. I will get you to Europe. I will get you to Brussels, and I will get you to the European Commission. And I will make you a promise that your case will be won in Europe, and this decision here today will be overturned for what it is. And I said, you can do that. He said, I can. And better still, he said, I won't charge you a penny. Can you believe that, Anna? This is quite unbelievable. So he said, go home. He said, dust yourself off for a couple of weeks. He says, get rid of the bad smell that you'll be taking away from this place. I said, okay. And he called me in a fortnight's time. And true to his word, make a long story short, Anna, we got into Europe. He identified the breach in the European legislation, which I was able to put in front of the Commission. The Commission agreed totally that we were in the right, and that the judgment made by the High Court was wrong. The decision made by Buncrana was wrong. The contribution by the EPA was wrong. Donegal County Council was wrong, and that we had actually saved the environment. We had saved turning the Lough Foyle and the beautiful beaches and the beautiful air we have into an open sewer, which is what they did in Buncrana. So, you know, they actually gave the Irish government, the European Commission sent a team over specially to Dublin, and they gave them an alternative, because this was the second time that the government had signed off on the legislation saying that they were compliant, and we proved that they were telling, well, I'm not going to say lies, I have said it, but that they were wrong. And she could not believe, the lady in charge, the barrister in charge in Europe could not believe that somebody from the hills of Donegal would be able to tell the European Commission that the Irish government was taking a hand at them. And she said, before you're back in Donegal, I will be speaking to the Irish government. And I can tell you, she was very serious looking when she said that. True to her word, she came to Dublin and told the Irish government they had a choice. She said, we have now upgraded this to a formal complaint against the government. You're on your way to the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg, or you can put your hands up, say you got it wrong, amend the legislation, abandon that project because it's absolutely not acceptable, because you've never carried out a screening process under the EIA directive, and said, up to yourselves. Within 2 days, they came out with a white flag, said they got it wrong. They amended it, went back into the Dáil, amended the legislation, and there wasn't a word about it in the mainstream media. It was a massive case won by a small community in the hills of Donegal, a David and Goliath. We took them on, but we had a Goliath on our side, and we didn't know it at the time. Peter Sweetman, a mighty man.
Well, that is an absolutely wonderful story, and it's a story where justice was not done in the Irish courts, but you got justice in Europe. And just thank you so much for that. And you explained it so well. We'll be coming back to you again in a little while in the second half of the programme. My next guest this evening is the founder of Integrity Ireland, and he has an encyclopedic knowledge of the Irish court system. And he has recently published a book, and he's going to chat to me now about how judges are appointed and how a judge can be removed if he actually does something untoward. And I suppose this is a very, very topical issue in the light of Supreme Court Judge Mr. Justice Seamus Wolfe, the Golfgate affair, Susan Denham, and all of that. Good evening, Stephen, and you're very welcome to Centre Ground.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. Nice to see you, and it's good to listen to the lads there sharing their experiences.
Yes.
Where would you like me to start, Anna?
Well, Stephen, as I've said to you when I was chatting to you earlier this week, we could actually do a series on all of the information that you have and all of your knowledge. But for this evening, I'd just like you to tell us how judges are appointed, how they can be removed, and just maybe give us a little bit of your own personal experience in the court. So maybe if you just begin by saying, how are judges appointed?
Well, as always, when we're dealing with the establishment here in Ireland, there is a way that things are supposed to be done, and there's the way that things are actually done. And usually there's a third dimension, which is what they tell the public is going on. So the official, the status of judges in every country around the world, they're supposed to be independent. As a matter of fact, it's a constitutional requirement, the separation of powers between the legislator, the executive, and the judiciary. And this is supposed to be the basis of every democracy, that you need three distinct separate entities that don't overlap, which guarantees to the public that you have democratic processes and democratic institutions looking after our democratic interests. But in fact, and I can't, I'll be careful not to give any names here, Anna, but the process at the moment, we are told, is that from 1995, the Judicial Advisory Appointments Board was set up by legislation. Now, this is a board comprising a dozen or so people, headed up by the Chief Justice, the presidents of the various courts, and then a few selected lay people who are usually well embedded in the establishment and know to do as they're told. Now, the first thing that needs to be clarified, Anna, is that, excuse me, the first thing that needs to be clarified is that the Judicial Advisory Appointments Board was supposed to be replaced by what we called the the Judicial Appointments Commission, which was not ratified, but it was presented in a bill in 2017. Now that was making its way through the Houses of the Oireachtas, but it lapsed in January of this year, when the 32nd Dáil retired. That and a number of other institutions that are fundamental to the democratic function of the country. But to stick with the Judicial Advisory Appointments Board, known obviously as the JAB. Now, the process is supposed to be, or at least the public are told, that the JAAB has a collection of names of suitable candidates to become judges whenever there's a vacancy. And they, through this very robust process, they sift through all of the prospective candidates, and then they nominate, let's say, 2 or 3 judges to fill a particular position, prospective judges, and the government then takes their advice on board before appointing the judge. But it's a load of nonsense. It's hooey, if we can use that term here on the live cast here. In 25 years of its existence, the question has to be asked: how many actual interviews has the JAB done, the JAAB? And the simple answer to that is not even. The names that are presented to the JAAB are usually seconded over to them from the political parties. They in turn can nominate people to be appointed as judges to the government, but guess what? The government doesn't actually have to take any notice of them whatsoever, and they can move ahead and appoint completely different people altogether. And that, as we've seen, is usually what happens as each government comes to the end of its term. They pack their own people into the ranks of the judiciary so that they have more control, political control, over what's happening in the courts. And obviously, this is a fundamental denial of the separation of powers.
Okay, and you have described that just so eloquently, and even I can understand it. I've always said that matters to do with the law and the courts, I just can't grasp, but I have completely grasped that. And basically, what you're saying there is that the judges are political appointees, which goes against our constitution. Now, there's so much talk at the moment about Judge Wolf and all of that, and we won't repeat. I think at this stage people are well aware of what has happened, and we're not speaking specifically about him. But if a judge is found to have carried on in a manner that is unbecoming of a judge, how can that judge be got rid of?
Right then. Now, this is very interesting. I think perhaps the best anecdote to explain this, somewhat interestingly, I was with Colm, your first speaker, about 4 years ago. We went to the Dáil with an application containing over 7,000 signatures, asking for a particular judge, a district court judge, to be impeached. Now, the mechanisms, there are mechanisms in place to sanction or rebuke or reprimand and even remove from office judges who are guilty of serious conduct or become capable of carrying out their office. Now, again, even relatively simple animals, we go down the track of nation's judges are demonstrating very serious misconduct, including criminal actions. And when we report them to the statutory authorities, now whether this be regards the DPP's office, to the Houses of the Office, to the Minister for Justice, we keep reporting these crimes, and the invariable response is shut down. Now, sorry, there were some strange noises.
There appears to be a little bit of a problem with our connection, but we'll carry on regardless. It's possibly to do with internet coverage. And I'm in Longford, you're in Mayo, and the broadband connection mightn't be that good. So, Stephen, I know that you've had a number of encounters in the courts where clearly you believe that the activity of the legal eagles was actually unlawful. And maybe before I say that, you have always been at pains to point out to me that you are not on a mission to do away with the court system or with the legal system as it stands, that you really have massive, huge regard for judges and barristers and solicitors who uphold the law. Your only difficulty is with those people who don't uphold the law in court. So maybe you can tell me a little bit about your experience in court where you believe that judges have not upheld the law.
Yes, well, thanks, Anna. We're being as diplomatic as possible here. I don't actually deal in beliefs anymore. We just deal in facts and realities. And I've chosen three short anecdotes to demonstrate. The first one was some years ago. My problem started with the establishment, if you like, when I had a personal run-in as a sports official. I'm a sports official, so I had a personal run-in with somebody who it would transpire was, let's say, politically connected. And I believe that will give the listeners and the viewers an understanding of how it's possible that the following things could have happened. But the first notable one I think is worth mentioning, apart from that I've now had 26 different judges get up and either leave their courts or refuse to take legitimate applications that in any way challenge the establishment of the status quo. And when they do this, of course, they're committing offences themselves. But the first one is probably, again, I'll be careful not to mention any particular names here, but a very senior High Court judge allowed a man who can only be described as an arch criminal from the UK to go into the High Court and claim to be an attorney. Now, this is not possible under the laws in Ireland. Any lawyers or barristers or even litigants with a bit of knowledge, certainly any judges watching this, will think this is bizarre, unbelievable, and incredible. But this particular senior judge allowed this arch criminal to embark on a series of appearances in the High Court, the Court of Appeal, and the Circuit Court, where he literally acted as if he was a barrister without even showing his driving license, his ID. And the only way we got to stop this, because in each successive hearing where he was in, obviously I was the plaintiff, believe it or not. I was the plaintiff in these cases, and I would object to this man speaking in any of these courtrooms. And he would quote the fact that this senior High Court judge had allowed him to come into court and do this, so therefore it was okay. Eventually, believe it or not, we had to write an offer into this particular senior High Court judge and advise him that we would be arriving with a Garda escort on a particular day, and if this criminal came into the court again and misrepresented himself as a barrister, that we would be arresting the High Court judge under citizens' arrest powers for conspiracy to pervert justice. So that would be...
Okay. Okay. I know that you have written a book that has been published recently, Stephen, where
Yes.
you outline these two cases and a number of others. Just briefly tell us a little bit about your book and where people can find it.
Yes, Anna. Well, as you can see, criminality in the Irish courts and the absence of the rule of law. The subtitle on the front of the cover is an expose of arguably the largest and most profitable publicly funded criminal organisation in Ireland, plus the names and positions of over 100 accused officials and office holders, including lawyers, Gardaí, judges, TDs and government ministers. That sort of sums it up. What we did, Anna, very quickly, was we served notice on the government going way back now into late last year that there was a host of provable criminal actions going on, particularly up in the courts, at the office of the DPP, senior Garda management, barristers, solicitors, court service staff. And no matter who we reported it to, and no matter what actions we took, including trying to take it up to Europe and getting a petition into the European Parliament, that the whole system was closing ranks to protect these miscreants. So we asked the government, would you like to know the names? We'll give you 100 names. Here are all the crimes they're committing. And we served it on all of the sitting TDs and senators in the 32nd ball. And believe it or not a single person came back to us asking for the names of the alleged criminals in this book. So we decided, okay, July the 1st, to align with other developments in the pro-justice field, we published the book complete with photographs, names, crimes being committed, with the idea that, listen, if there's no accountability for these people, then we've got to publish. We've got to share them and raise awareness among the public of the sort of people that are running the show in this state. And as you know, Anna, it all links together. Everything that Enda was saying, that Colm was saying, we're facing what I would describe as, again, with the exceptions, the notable exceptions to the rule, who I'd have the great respect and admiration for, but unfortunately there's not enough of them. The show is being described as a criminal cabal.
Right, and on that note, we will leave it for the moment. Stephen, I just want to thank you for that expose, and if people want to find out more about it, they can buy your book. It's available on Amazon, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome.
Now, normally this time every week we have a panel discussion that's anchored by Marion McGowan. Marion is not able to be with us this week. Please God, she'll be with us next week. And at very short notice, Margaret Fox Lennon has agreed to step in and anchor our panel discussion for this week. Margaret, I want to thank you so much for agreeing to do this at very, very short notice, I might add.
Thank you, Anna, and very best wishes to Marion.
Yes.
She will be better.
So, Margaret, what do you believe is the hot topic of the week?
Well, it was very harrowing to look at some of the Stokestown evictions there. We have a huge issue ongoing in all walks of Irish life, in going into and out of the High Court, Supreme Court, etc. I just wanted to bring up an issue that affects many families in Ireland. There is a scheme called the Primary Medical Certificate, which allows usually wheelchair users or those with very severe mobility issues tax concessions. Doesn't mean they get a free pass, it just allows them tax concessions. So recently there was a Supreme Court judgment on June 18th, where two children had, their parents had taken a case against the Disabled Drivers Board of Appeal and Minister for Finance, Paschal Donoghue. Both children are wheelchair users. Both are quite ill. They were refused. They went to the High Court, lost. Court of Appeal, which was actually heard in a building that's not wheelchair accessible, ironically, lost. And the state then looked for costs against both families before they were even, given leave to appeal to the Supreme Court. So they went to the Supreme Court, and this took place over, it's almost 4 years since the first child applied. The Supreme Court ruled in favour of both children on all points of law. Recently, both families have discovered that actually many PQs have been asked in the houses of the Oireachtas since the Supreme Court judgment. Neither child has actually been issued with their primary medical cert, I might add, 4 months on. Though we do know if they had lost, the bailiffs wouldn't be waiting for 4 months to arrive at their gate. A couple of people have helped me hugely. Don Myers, Amanda Reeves, and Stephen Kerwin, who took the case, spent years of blood, sweat and tears, pro bono, often late at night, just working unbelievably for the families. He managed to get Derek Shortall on board barrister, and then the families were lucky enough that Michael Lynn volunteered his services. Now,
can I interrupt you there, Margaret? Can I interrupt you there? So those people that you're speaking about are actually the legal team. So these are
yes, the
barristers and the solicitors that are acting on behalf of the families.
The families were both very fortunate that they took this case as a case of public interest pro bono. But since the Supreme Court judgment, it came to my attention as an admin of the DCA Warriors that a number of TDs had asked in the houses of the Oireachtas since June 18th as to the status of applications made for primary medical certificates on behalf of their constituents. Questions were asked of Minister O'Donoghue and also Minister Donnelly, Minister for Health. Now, neither minister admitted that they had stopped the primary medical health cert scheme, that they are not processing any applications, nothing. So, like, we have families that have gone through the horrendous ordeal of, years of court. And we now have two government ministers who have decided to take action on suspending the scheme completely and then not giving an honest answer when asked by TDs. So my question there is, despite being vindicated in the Supreme Court, have ministers lied by omission in the houses of the Oireachtas by not giving the information? We then started to get the information from the HSE verbally. They did not want to put it into writing, but a member of the Warriors contacted them and asked for it in writing, and then we were flooded with them all coming in. And it was only in the last 2 days we contacted the likes of Mark McSherry, Dennis Naughton, and a number of other TDs and asked them to ask directly if the minister would admit that he had stopped the scheme. So I suppose really, in light of all that families are going through, and these two children are very ill, usually the parents are very ill too, can the government then just decide they are not going to do anything? They knew this case was running for years. Their advisors surely didn't get up on June 18th and say, oh lads, this is possible, this is possibly going to be an issue here, these children. So what will we do? Surely some plan should have been put in place for the situation that it was very clear really that these children were going to win, and the families' legal team were going to go to the European Court of Human Rights if they had not been vindicated in the Supreme Court.
So I suppose your question really is, Margaret, the fact that the families won the Supreme Court case.
Yes.
They had not been allowed this concession, and the response of the government was to secretly do away with the concession for everybody.
Yes.
And to do so secretly. And this news has actually broken in the last day, and we're looking at some of the headlines from RTE and so on. The news that Minister Donnelly and Minister Donoghue have secretly and quietly, without letting anybody know, have suspended this tax concession indefinitely.
Yes.
So it's not just the families involved, the two families involved, but for all new applicants.
For everybody.
I take it.
So by not answering the question, I suppose you can ask, did they lie by omission in the houses of the Oireachtas? Okay,
that's a very good question. I suppose then the issue is lies by omission. So maybe if we could take you in first, Colm, what are your views on this? Have you come across the issue of lies by omission?
Well, I suppose to go back to qui tacit consent, by not responding or not answering the question, that there is no answer to it. That's the way that it is, and there's something there in law, qui tacit consent, that silence is consent. And you know, this is the ways that they get around stuff by you know, all these different advisors that they have and putting off the questions. And I believe that even now to ask a question in the Dáil that you have to submit it first, and that they send it back to you the way they want it asked. But in reality, they're just, I suppose what they're doing is putting the bills, anytime that they make a mistake or an omission, we pay for it. That's.
Would you just elaborate a little bit on that, Colm? What do you mean when somebody in public office makes a mistake, we pay for it?
Well, like if you look back at is it Fingleton and the banks and the people that's getting watched over by the central bank. You know, they're all supposed to be experts, and no one ever you can look at from the McCabe, from the McBreartys, from the Garda Credit Union, right down, the regulator has failed the public, and it's all done by the central bank. Everything is regulated by the central bank. Insurance, fraud, insurance companies, all that. And it ends up, when they make the mistakes, the man on the ground, the taxpayer, pays for everything. And when the profits are made, you can see where it goes to the management, to the TDs themselves. Like, that's why we're supposed to be all in this together. We're all in it together, but we are the ones that's paying and they are the ones that gain it.
Okay, yeah, that actually is a really, really brilliant point, Colm. Enda, what are your views on this, lies by omission?
Well, yeah, well, you know, taking an overview, the way I see it, down this last number of years, there has been a tsunami of scandals at every level and very much at the highest level. And all we have seen is nobody is held meaningfully to account for anything. As Colin just says, at the end of the day, when they're found out and they're caught with their hands in the sweetie jar, there's a check signed on behalf of the state, our money. Everybody walks away, and the big statement you get, we have put something in place to make sure this never ever happens again. And within months, it's all happening all over again. The system is broken, it's dysfunctional, and they're getting away with blue murder. And it's happening and will continue to happen until there's something meaningful done by the people.
Okay, that's a good point to come in on there, Stephen.
Yes, Anna. Look, a couple of quick points. We were talking earlier about the disabled children. The pattern is exactly the same as what Colm's saying and Enda here. The state knows that every court case that gets extended or prolonged or anything of that nature is making money for the franchise. And the franchise is judges, barristers, lawyers, court service staff, ministers of justice, etc., etc. They all profit immediately from court cases extending. Now, if it's something that is going to embarrass the state or name highly placed individuals, you can be sure that the state will appoint panels of lawyers at our expense to defend the cases. And even in these medical negligence cases and the like, they'll go right to the wire. Even though they know that they're going to eventually lose the case, they will drag it out for years, causing terrible distress to a family, and eventually then settle on the court steps with our money on the condition that the family doesn't talk about the settlement, and everybody goes their separate way. Now, on that point, I think where we're all missing, we're missing a play here. That people are not aware that for example, we hear that, let's say, someone who works for the state has committed a fraudulent act or has caused a loss to us. Well, there are laws that say if you cause a loss to another person through deliberate deception, it is a criminal offence. And if you can establish that you have lost something because of the incorrect or unlawful actions of another person, you can go into the district court and you can prosecute them under the common former legislation that people can look up.
The difficulty, though, is that if you actually go into the court and bring your case, there's no actual guarantee that you're going to win the case, as happened to Enda when he took his case. It depended on the judge on the day. And indeed, the Justice Committee last year, this was one of the issues that came up before the Oireachtas Justice Committee, and one of the people that appeared before that committee, he is a lecturer in law in UCC. His name just escapes me at the minute, and it was on the tip of my tongue. He actually said that he was speaking in relation to family law, and he said the outcome depends on the judge that you appear before on the day. So you get very arbitrary decisions from one court to the next, that there is actually no consistency.
Yes, sorry. Can I come in there just for a second, Anna? Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Yes, but it shouldn't be arbitrary, because the law is actually very clear, and in most circumstances the law can be applied exactly as it's written verbatim. Now, rather than get into this as an aside, Anna, the problem we're facing is that many people who are already dishonest and disreputable are getting into these positions of power and control, and we unfortunately have allowed them to amass so much control over the state now that it is, one of the only ways that we can do anything about this is by confronting them and shaming them and naming them, as we've done in the books that we've been publishing, and encouraging people, even if it's going to be a long, hard slug, because they are relying on Enda's story, and who was the other one, Louise O'Keefe. It took her 17 years to prove her case, about abuse in the primary schools. They're relying on people, the ordinary person in the street, going, well, I haven't got 23 years to spare. So, and I don't have 300,000 euros. What have they come after me? They're relying on our fear. The truth of the matter is they're supposed to be working on behalf of people. We've got a criminal cabal using the resources of the state to fund their own cabal. We have to do something about it.
Yes, and that is a really good point. And if I could just bring in Margaret again, and I suppose the one thing that has come clearly from the case that you've outlined, the two families involved in taking that case to the Supreme Court were actually blessed with their legal team. And one of those was Stephen Kerwin from KOD Lines, and Stephen is a past pupil of mine. So I suppose the one thing we want to emphasise tonight is that in all walks of life there are good and there are bad people. And there are some really good judges, there are really good solicitors and barristers, and there are equally, bad solicitors and judges and so on. But the two families involved in the case that you outlined tonight, Margaret, were blessed with their legal team.
Absolutely. I just wanted to say I am very interested in buying your book, and another lady who had to go through the courts, I think we should not forget today, Emma McMahunta.
Yes, her anniversary was this week, her second anniversary.
Yeah, and we all know what the judiciary and the courts have done to the mothers of Ireland, such as the families in this case, Emma McMahunta, Cathy Sinnott, Mary O'Donoghue. The list is endless, and it is shameful. I have one question. What can we do to take back power from these corrupt individuals?
And I suppose that actually is maybe a good question which we can leave with our viewers. Who would like to come in with that final word then? Anybody like to come in with a final word? What can we do?
If you like, Anna, I can at least use this opportunity to say that there are a lot of decent, sincere people out there, and hopefully as well in the professions, who are sick and tired of all of the corruption going on. And there are projects afoot. I don't know if tonight's the time to speak about it, but in the event that anybody does read the book, at the back of the book, there's a reference to a new organization which we hope will provide a lot of the solutions that are required to reform, radically reform our so-called justice system, in particular the courts. We have to reform, and they're not going to reform themselves out of the goodness of their hearts, because the ones that are the worst at this, basically, that's the problem. They don't really care about society. They don't care about the people that are coming before them. They have a mindset where they are superior to the rest of us, and they're there for profit and power and all the other vices. So we will say, hopefully, Anna, maybe on another occasion, we can talk about these other organizations that are setting up, but we are taking action, and people should watch this space, as they say. Thanks, Anna.
That is a very good note on which to end. As I said at the outset, it's not my forte to discuss matters to do with the law or judges or courts. I'm completely out of my depth, and I entered tonight's programme with a little bit of trepidation. There was no need for that. I want to thank Colm Granahan from ACT Anti-Corruption Taskforce, Enda Craig from Buncrana Together, and Stephen Manning from Integrity Ireland for their wonderful contribution tonight. Very, very enlightening. And I think that they really described in a very, very balanced and truthful way what is actually happening in our courts. I'd like to pay a special thanks to Margaret Fox from DCA Warriors, who came in at very short notice to anchor our panel discussion, and it's a real pleasure to have you back with us again, Margaret. And a final word of thanks to Stephen Kerr from the Irish Inquiry, who has made tonight's live stream possible. And as I said at the outset, a huge amount of work goes in pre-production to get this live stream out, and Stephen is in the weeks ahead going to be bringing on more people to present programmes, so his workload is going to increase, and he's putting a call out for volunteers to help out. So if you have particular skills like editing or videography or other ways that you think that you can help, please go to the Irish Inquiry website. There's a tab there, help us. Click on that and you can provide your details. Stephen is putting a call out for other presenters. If you feel you have what it takes to present a programme, you can put in your inquiry in that way. Once again, I want to thank you, the viewers at home, for watching. I hope that you have found tonight's programme as enlightening and as educational as I have found it. You have a huge part to play in all of this by sharing this video. In the days ahead, Stephen will be putting out individual videos for each of the speakers tonight, and there will be links on those videos to their various websites and so on. So until next Wednesday night at 8 o'clock from Centre Ground, Bannock de Orif Galair.
Thank you, Anna.